All right. We're talking today with John Bornhofen of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, John, let's begin in the beginning. Where and when were you born?
March 20, 1934 in Des Plaines, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. It's right next to O'Hare Field.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, did you grow up there or did you move around?
No, we grew up there. Before I went in the military, that's where I lived. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you were a kid when Pearl Harbor happened.
Yeah.
Do you remember hearing about that?
I remember listening to it on the radio, and we were driving back from my mother's cousin's house, I think, and it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they came on and said that Pearl Harbor has been bombed, and my dad very solemnly said something about that means war, and my mother didn't say a word. Mm-hmm. She wasn't interested in talking about a war. She hated war, and she hated depressions. Mm-hmm. She went through both of them.
All right. Now, what did your family do for a living when you were growing up?
My dad was an auto mechanic, one of the best, maybe the best in Des Plaines, Illinois. And my mom was a housekeeper,
okay.
Raised kids.
All right. And so even in the Depression, he had some work anyway.
Yeah, he worked through the Depression, and she did not, because she was working for, quote, the Express Company in the 20s, and when the Depression hit, they went out of business. Mm-hmm. So she went back to the farm where she grew up, mm-hmm. and went back to her family and stayed there. Yeah.
All right, but then by the time you're born, they're all living together.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And so now you get through the war years, you come out the other end. All right. And 1950, the Korean War starts.
Yeah.
All right. Now, were you aware of the draft at that point?
Not really, because I was 16 when the war started,
right.
And I wasn't eligible, and we weren't connected with that sort of thing anyway. We were more interested in sports and getting through high school and stuff like that, you know. But I was aware that it was on, mm-hmm. and certainly, yeah.
Yeah. And then, how did you wind up entering the service?
Well, it came when I got to be 18. The Korean War was still going, but it was at a reduced level. So we had de-escalated it quite a bit to that point. But nevertheless, my dad was concerned that I was going to go and fight for Truman's program, and he was a MacArthur guy, so he mm-hmm. thought that Truman was wasting our troops over there. So he said, "Why don't you go join the reserves at Glenview?" Oh yeah, Naval Reserve. I'm interested in Naval Air, so that mm-hmm. makes sense. Like when we joined that, when I was 18, I was in Naval Reserve.
All right.
That was 5 miles from my house, Glenview Naval Air Station.
Right. Okay. And was there any problem joining, or were they just happy to have you?
Well, I don't know, neither one. There were so many people, but they told us we were not draft exempt. Mm-hmm. They told us right off the bat, okay, fine. So I was in that, and I was assigned to Fajron 725, I think it was, which means Fleet Air Service Squadron. And we didn't fly planes, we worked on them and stuff like that, but that's what we did. So I was in the reserves in that
okay.
unit.
All right, so when did you actually join the reserves?
March of '52.
Okay. And then once you joined, do they give you some kind of boot camp or basic training?
Some sort of what?
Basic training.
There was a program. See, this was weekends.
Yes.
1 weekend a month, so they were working basic training into that. Okay. So it was, compared to a real boot camp, it was mild, you know. But we eventually got through that, and we did some stuff, you know. But whatever.
But did you not have to go through a standard Navy boot camp at Great Lakes?
No, we didn't do it. No, we were all weekends, mm-hmm. and then in the summer we did 2 weeks a year. Mm-hmm. We went off and did some stuff some other place. Yeah.
All right. So do you remember where you went the summer of '52?
Yeah. Let's see. One of those years we spent our 2 weeks. It was called. I'll think of it in a minute. We spent at Norfolk Naval Air Station, and that was an interesting experience because those days we had the PBYs that landed out in the water, And then guys went out and put wheels on them. They were and brought them in on land. So that was an interesting experience. That was what we were not working. Well, I don't know what the hell we were doing, but we were observing that.
Right. Okay. And again, the PBY is a flying boat. It's an airplane with essentially a boat hull so it can land on the water.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Now, at a certain point, though, you go on to active duty.
Yeah. Well, that was when I got my draft notice.
Okay.
And that was 4.5 years later. So I was having a very successful civilian life, and was getting more and more successful and better. And all of a sudden, I got my draft notice. So,
right.
so I went active duty. So I went down to the draft board and said, and this girl that was running it was the older sister of one of my grammar school friends, but she didn't know me. Mm-hmm. And I went in and I said, I got my draft notice, but I'm not going. And she jumped up. She hadn't heard that before. And then I said, I'm going active duty in the Navy. Oh, okay, fine. You know, and so that's what I did. Okay. They sent me to Washington Receiving Station at Anacostia.
Okay. To back up a little bit, had you gone to college in the meantime?
I was in college part-time at Northwestern for a year or so before I went to the Navy. So I had some college credits. And then in the Navy, one of the things we had was a lot of boredom, especially at sea where at night there's nothing to do. I mean, nothing. So I signed up for various USAFI, Armed Forces Institute correspondence courses, mm-hmm. both high school and college.
Yeah.
So I rounded out my education that way. Yeah. And that was very successful.
Okay. Now, in the period between when you graduated from high school and when you actually went on active duty,
yeah.
So you say you were in college part-time?
My first job was in a printing plant in Chicago,
okay.
Third biggest in the world. And then I went on to a job with Household Finance Corporation, mm-hmm. which we don't even have around here, but they're big, they're a consumer finance company, and they're really huge in Chicago.
They advertised on Cub games, yes.
They do, yeah.
At least they did.
Yeah, they did, yeah. And so I worked for them, and then I went to the Navy for 2 years, active duty, working there, yeah.
Right. Okay. So
and while I was working there, I was going to night school at Northwestern.
Okay. All right. So we're going to back up. So you go, and so it's 56 that you're going active duty? Was that, or 54?
Yeah, no, it's 56.
Okay.
November of 56.
Okay.
The day of the election, I went to the Navy. I voted, and I went off to defend my country.
All right. Okay. So your first station then was Anacostia?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the receiving station.
Okay. And what happens to you there?
Well, you get processed, and eventually you get sent someplace. You're assigned. But it was a great place for liberty. It just mm-hmm. was. I mean, you could go to the Smithsonian, you go to plays, you go to this, that. That was wonderful. Then they sent me to Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and that was where I was going to be stationed with GS-32, Anti-Submarine Squadron 32.
Okay.
And we got to Quonset Point, and I checked in, and my unit. So it turns out our military is on full alert because of the
Suez crisis,
the Suez Canal problem. So consequently, my unit is out on the Leyte aircraft carrier, and they're on sudden call. I forget what you call this. They were just called up with 2 hours ago and sent out there, and so we were sent up there to join them. And it was some of us, and we had mail and stuff like that also. But we were set up on a destroyer, and the destroyer was up in Fall River. It was in the river, mm-hmm. and it was just tied to the dock, going like this. You got on that thing, all of a sudden everybody's sick. I didn't get sick, but almost everybody else did. They're puking over the side and everything. We hadn't even untied from the dock.
Okay.
So then we spent 4.5 days. On that destroyer to get out to the Leyte was the carrier they were on. Mm-hmm. Our guys were on, yeah.
All right.
And when I got on the ship, I'm wandering around trying to find my apartment, and all of a sudden the captain comes on and says, "We've been the alert has been called off. We're going back to port." And guys started rolling on the floor and screaming and jumping up and down. I'm saying, hell, I just got here and we're going back already.
All right.
So at any rate, that was interesting.
Okay. How did they get you from a destroyer onto the aircraft carrier?
That's a good question. We went over. There were about 20 of us, 19 of us, something like that, and we went over on a bosun's chair from the destroyer to a cargo ship, and then we had lunch on the cargo ship, and then we went over on the bosun's chair again to the carrier, because to go from the destroyer to the carrier would have been such a huge leap. They're so different in height. You know, the destroyer's like that much off the surface of the earth.
Right.
The ocean, and the carrier's 60 feet up. You know, so okay. That's how they did
All
that.
right. And for people who don't know, explain what a bosun's chair is.
It's a chair with almost no accoutrements. You're just sitting in it and you're hanging on. And I think we were buckled in. We must have been, and then it's moved for you up to where
so
you want to
it's like
get.
suspended on a cable, and
It's
they pull you
it's
up.
extended on a cable, sure.
Yeah.
And when I first got on it, the first thing we did, we moved it, and I was sitting looking down at the ocean. There was right down there. So for that, they rectified that pretty fast, and that was that.
So welcome to the Navy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So you go back to port then, and then did you stay in port for a while at that point?
Yeah, we did. But at some point, we went down to Key West at that air station down there, and then we were there for about almost 2 weeks, and then we were sent up later on. We were sent out only after a month or so down to Guantanamo Bay, and we were then on the Tarawa, that aircraft carrier Tarawa, and we were in what do you call it now? We were getting geared up to be an anti-submarine carrier. It had been an attack carrier before, right. And I'm in an anti-submarine squadron.
Right.
With S2Fs.
So was this kind of a shakedown cruise for them? Or?
That's what it was, yeah. Shakedown cruise for anti-submarine, yeah. And it was wild down there, I'll tell you. You want me to tell you that?
Sure.
Well, the first night we were on Liberty, we got back to base. We had to take a small boat from the shore to the carrier, because they were out in the stream, so to speak, and they couldn't pull up the
dock, yeah.
dock because it wasn't big enough or something. So I'm standing there on the pier, and there's a trellis over the head, and all of a sudden, submarine is up on this trellis, and he's swinging. He comes up right into the guy next to me, feet first, and takes him out. And then there's a big fight. Navy and Marines, just a fight. And then I ended up with some Marine shoes, so I threw it overboard, and we went back to the ship. That was night one. Okay. The next night, this kind of experience I had. So the next night we're coming back from I went in every time I had Liberty. I would go in, have a beer, and go to a movie or something like that. So we're coming back from a movie, and a whole bunch of Navy guys, about 200 guys, going back, streaming back, just on our own, you know. And all of a sudden we hear some music coming. And we hear the Marine Corps hymn, and all of a sudden over this hill comes 8 Marines arm in arm, and they're singing the Marine Corps hymn. And one guy hollers out, "Let's get the effing jarheads." And all these guys run past me and chase these guys down and beat them up underneath the stands. This is the American military. And the next night, there was another something like that. We were sitting in a bar, and all of a sudden, we were sitting in this bar, a table. It was like a card table, I guess, and lawn chairs. All of a sudden, a body hurls through and wipes on our table and our chairs. It was nuts. So that was the extent of the
Now,
action.
was all of the drinking and stuff going on the base, or were they able to go off base in those days?
Oh no, you couldn't go off base until Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Sunday too. I don't know, but during the week you couldn't. Yeah.
All right. But this now before Castro actually had taken over. Was Castro?
Oh no,
in
no,
charge of
he
Cuba
was
yet?
just he wasn't he hadn't taken over yet. He was out there, and it was at some point, I forget whether I was there or right after I was there, but his brother Raul captured a busload of sailors, and they were held captive for about 4 months or so. And all they were given to eat was chicken, raw chicken, and they lost about 30 pounds, 40 pounds apiece. But they eventually got back. But that was after I was out of there.
Okay.
We were out of there by then. Then we went to, at some point we went to Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Virgin Islands, American Virgin Islands, Charlotte, Amali, and what's that island down off of Venezuela?
To Curacao or Aruba or?
No, it's I forget. It's right close, and then another little island we went to, and had some liberty in all those places. The last one, the one with the hell's the name of it? Trinidad.
Okay.
That was not pleasant. We were going in there for liberty. We were told that they're having some sort of festival, and they like to get hats from people, and so we should be careful that they don't steal our hats. So anyway, I'm walking along with a bunch of my friends and buddies, and all of a sudden some kid comes up and steals a hat of some guy's walking in front of us, a Navy guy. So he started chasing this kid, so we can't let him go alone. So we ran with him, and then I looked around. And I saw these guys, these natives, streaming off the sidewalk into the road behind us. They're chasing us. We're chasing this guy. About 5 or 6 of us, and hundreds are chasing us. So I said, let's go this way. He goes that way. We go that way. That was that. Mm-hmm. But that was not a very pleasant place. All kinds of guys had bad experiences there in Trinidad. Yeah.
All right. Now, during this period on this cruise, were you actually looking for submarines, or were you
no.
sailing around?
This is all preliminary. We're getting over our getting ready for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, there were some guys that were probably pretty active there, but I don't remember anything except rudimentary stuff on my part.
All right. Now, at this point, what's your actual job or duty station?
I really wasn't assigned yet. Then later on it came, and I was assigned to the electronics unit, which is what I asked for, and because I'd been in the reserves, but sort of a half-assed program. So, but I learned a little bit about it, and so I was assigned to electronics, and we were the guys that took care of the mad boom and the radar. So we were the business end of the squadron. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what we were out there to do. So we were the guys that ran the equipment that did it.
Okay, let's talk a little bit just about life on these carriers, because these are not the really large they're not the biggest carriers in the fleet.
Well, they were big enough. They were standard size for World War II.
Okay.
But they weren't the next vintage. Yeah, they were bigger. Yeah.
You're not at the level of the nuclear carriers.
Oh no, not that
okay.
big. No.
All right. So, just what kind of accommodations did you have? What's daily life like on a ship?
We had really primitive. We had on one cruise, we call them cruises, missions. On one we had something like 80 guys in one compartment, and it was very rudimentary. The standard bunks that you see in photographs, and that's what we had. And had 4 of them to a rack, so that's. But we lived basically on the base. Mm-hmm. We lived on the carrier course when we were at sea.
Right.
But we got back on land. We went back to our barracks. Mm-hmm. We didn't hang around the ship.
Okay. So how long at a time would you be at sea?
At what?
How long would you be at sea?
Depends on what we were doing. we apparently did a number of short, maybe 2-week stints up. We would go up and operate south of Iceland in the North Atlantic, because that's where the Russian subs would come down from Archangel and those bases up there. And their job was to go and park off of the American big cities on the East Coast, Washington, Baltimore, New York, etc. And park there and wait for a war to break out. And the war broke out, it surfaced and fire their nuclear missiles. So we were to counter that. Yeah.
All right, and then just for other, just for basic kind of daily life sorts of stuff. You know, how did they feed you?
How'd they feed us?
Yeah.
The typical mess lines and that sort of thing. Yeah, that was pretty standard Navy.
Okay, and was the food any good?
Oh, it was excellent, and especially the big secret mission we went to. I'll tell you about that in a minute if you want. That was some of the best food I've had ever, I think. It was really good. They really made sure you ate well on that because you were gone for so long, but we'll come back to that because that was the end of my period.
All right. So let's go back now. So you finished the cruise in the Caribbean, unless you've got other stories about that you want to bring in.
Yeah.
Then what do you do after that?
Well, we went back and we did some short missions, and then we were part of the big NATO exercise, which was the largest peacetime assembly of ships in history, according to what we were told at the time. And this was in the summer of '57, and we went to up the northern Iceland, that area up there, and then we went to Europe for liberty. So we went into Rotterdam, and we were operating on behalf of these ships to keep submarines away from them. This was a huge fleet we were talking about here, and it was various NATO countries have contributions to it. Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you detect any submarines while you were out there?
Yeah, we did, but I don't know how many. But since that wasn't my job directly, I was supporting those missions. But yes, we did it because I know that because I wrote my mother a letter, and I found this later on. She kept them, and it said, the letter said to her something about we got two. Okay, so what we did, our job was to find the submarines, identify them, and then turn them over to another plane or ship, Navy, that would then follow them, and they would then stay with them for the rest of the time. And so they're right above them for all practical purposes, or up above them either in a ship or a plane, and so that we could attack them and sink them if we came to going to war. Right. Otherwise, they'd clobber Washington or New York or something with nuclear missiles.
All right. So how do you find them? Describe a little bit the equipment you were working on.
We had we had specialized equipment for anti-submarine. This the first time we've actually had anti-submarine equipment specifically for that purpose, and it was called magnetic anomaly detectors. And an anomaly is something that shows up someplace where it's not supposed to. And this was, we had these extensions that went on the back of the plane. The plane was an S2F, a Grumman S2F, specifically built for anti-submarine. And this thing came out the back, and it had cesium at the end. And that cesium interacted with the metal, the steel hull of the plane, of the submarine. So the submarine's underwater, but we could pick it up and identify it as a huge piece of metal, presumably submarine. And that's how we did it. That's how we did it. And we then fly over them until we could pop them off on another plane or and that sort of thing.
Okay. How big was that aircraft?
It was small. It was a two-engine. If I had a book here, if I had thought of that, I would have brought a book and I had a picture of it. I didn't realize it, but it was a two-engine Grumman, four-man plane, two pilots and two crew, one radar ran and one mad gear person. Yeah.
All right. So you got the two technicians to run the different equipment.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you know where
They
you are
were
and where
techs.
they are.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. So did you ever get to fly in one?
Yeah, I did, and it was really nice and interesting, and one of my great experiences. Yeah, and we also took off of the carrier, and we landed on the carrier. And those were two great experiences. And I remember the first time we landed, I thought it was really a rough landing. I thought we'd crashed on board, and I'm getting off, and I hear the ground crew guy say to the pilot, "Nice landing, sir." And I realized at that point that's the way it was all the time.
Yeah.
That was a good one. Because you're sitting there at in this case at the radar screen, and you hit the
flight deck.
the flight deck, and your face goes right down toward that radar, and you stop about that far from it. And then you hear nice landing, and you realize it's like this all the time.
All right. Now, were you out there at sea at all times of year?
Oh yeah, yeah. It didn't make any difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
I suppose if you're in the North Atlantic, it's the North Atlantic.
On the North Atlantic is cold and windy, and yeah, it's South Atlantic. Yeah, it's never any better than that. Yeah, it's worse out there, and it's tough for those crews because it's dangerous as hell. You know, they're maybe 500. I'm tempted to say 500 miles. Maybe a couple hundred miles from the ship. They're running patrols. They're running patterns, and it might be the middle of the night. It might be raining. There might be no moonlight. You know, it might be pure black.
Right.
So it's gutsy to be out there.
Okay.
But that's the way it is.
All right. I mean, did any of the aircraft have accidents or crashes?
We did, but not on those missions.
Okay.
We had a crash before I got in. It killed 2 crews. I think it was 8 people, but I wasn't in at the time. And then we had a crash on land. These were those first 2 were over the water. I think they're. I wasn't in then. I was just trying to remember what I heard. But then, right before we got out, I got out. We had one of our planes crash in North Adams, Massachusetts. No. Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
that's where North Adams is. Yeah.
Yeah, and the 2 pilots got out, and the 2 guys who were flying as crewmen, they were just passengers. Were burned alive, and one was 5'6", and the other was 6'5". You couldn't tell one from the other.
Wow.
The remains, but we never had any other accidents.
All right. So you had that big mission with the whole UN force. All right.
The what?
Well, you talked a little bit about the mission. You were with a large UN force and the large.
Oh yeah, that was
that
was
okay.
Yeah, that's when we went. Actually, then we went into Rotterdam for Liberty, and I went down to Paris. And I wanted to get some guys to go to Paris because nobody wanted to go. So I started talking it up. By the time we got there, it was like about 10 days before we got there. By the time so many people had changed their mind and signed up that my 11 days was cut in half to 5. So at any rate, I did get to Paris. That was a lot of fun and interesting.
How did people in Europe kind of treat you?
Well, our limited contact was all right.
Okay.
In Paris, they just treated you as probably easy tourists because we were so young and so energetic, stuff like that. But otherwise, they treated us all right. But I wasn't behind the Iron Curtain at that point.
Right.
You know,
But you
I was later on, but not that.
But you didn't feel any kind of anti-American sentiment at that point? or
no,
like that?
no. This was 1956, 57. No, we didn't get any of that.
Okay.
In fact, I was invited, when we got to Rotterdam, I was invited to somebody's house, a Netherlander, for dinner, and that was okay. Yeah. And it was sort of interesting because right as we were going into that harbor, Rotterdam, it's like a 40-mile
channel or something.
channel to get there. And the captain is telling us about getting ready for Rotterdam and the Dutch people, and he says that American sailors with German names, which is what mine is, might not be so treated so well by the Dutch people because of the war and all that. Fine, sure. So my friends started kidding me about that, and while they're kidding me, we passed this boat, blacker than hell, called the Wilhelm Bornhofen, not my name, and then they stood there, they just did it with their mouths open. So at any rate, that was that.
Okay, all right. Well, it's just kind of, now then talk about sort of other missions you had or other things.
Well, yeah, well, then the next one that I remember was the big secret mission that we went on at the summer of 1958, right before, a couple of months before I got out. We were told before this mission, take winter clothes. So, well, so what? We're going to go up to the North Atlantic, which is what we always do. Well, we did. We went out and we turned and went south, and we went around South America and went down to the Antarctic Circle and met up with the Norton Sound. The aircraft carried the Chihuahua. That's who I was operating with those days, Chihuahua, and 4 or 5 destroyers and 2 supply ships, and I think a submarine. And we were on this huge secret mission, really, really secret. And we met up with the Norton Sound, which came around from California, and they were a missile ship. And so our job was to fire missiles into the atmosphere that contained nuclear weapons and explode them up there. And we did 3 of those and record the results, extensive recording. And the reason was Eisenhower, the president at that time, was coming up to a meeting with, I guess it was Khrushchev.
Khrushchev by then, yeah.
That was like 2 weeks after we got back, something like that. And he was going to sign a missile treaty. So he wanted some information that we were, and some guy had some bright idea about how to get it to fire. And another thing that we were interested in. The year before, the Soviets had put Sputnik up, and this really scared our leaders, because now they realize, holy man, these guys will be able to fire nuclear weapons on us from space. So that was another thing we were supposed to do, was to figure out how explosions would operate up there. And we did. That's why we fired these our nuclear weapons from the South Atlantic, in the middle of the area from Africa to South America, in between there. We're near the Antarctic Circle. So it's about the deepest area you could go without having your missiles go over electronic equipment on the ground. So that's what we did. So that kept it secret, yeah. And then on the way back, we went to Rio de Janeiro for Liberty. But that was about a 3.5-month mission. And almost all the records were destroyed after that. So it's hard to find out about it. It's mentioned in Ann what's her name's book on the DARPA, defense research projects and something. It's called DARPA. It's part of the Defense Department. And we were the first project. They were set up for our mission. They were set up for, now they've been in existence ever since, and they do all these interesting things. They come up with all kinds of, well, if the military does something really strange, extreme, it's because of DARPA probably.
Okay.
So that's how that came about.
So you stopped in Rio on the way back.
What's that?
You stopped in Rio on the way back.
Yes, we did, yeah.
And what was that like?
It was a lot of fun. One of the things that really irked me about the Navy, and I decided I would never re-up, was that we, the enlisted guys, were, it was off limits to go to the big nightclubs. And I would have loved to spend every night in those nightclubs, and we couldn't do that. And they were officers only. And I know why, because these guys are getting so damn drunk they can't go back on their own, so they got to be carried back or whatever, you know. So I didn't like that at all, and that was one of these class distinctions that I really resented. And so, but other than that, but we did all kinds of other stuff. And I went up to Corcovado, you know, the big statue, and I went over to Sugarloaf Mountain, and all that stuff, you know. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It was an experience, because I'd known about Rio before that. I'd seen pictures of it, so it was an experience.
Okay. Now, was the Navy fully integrated at this point? I mean, did you have black sailors on the ship?
Well, we had one black guy in our unit, and he kept him to himself, not because I wanted him, but but he just did. And but basically where they were found was on the mess decks. We were not fully integrated as a service yet. Yeah.
All right, so they weren't in the regular crew in the engine room
Well,
flight
I don't know
decks
about the engine room,
or on the flight
but
decks.
they weren't in my unit,
Yeah.
except for this one guy.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what I can say with clarity. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Now, think back over the course of that time on active duty. Are there other particular stories from your active duty service that you want to bring into this?
Well, I had a lot of fun on my liberties. I mean, I really did, and we had some experiences that aren't worth telling, but they were fun, and I tried to see as much as I could, do as much as I could, anytime we got to another country. I didn't waste any time. In fact, I paid people to take my watch so I could go off on liberty, and they could sit there and do nothing. And also I was in night check, which is a night crew that worked at night, and I wasn't doing a very good job because I wasn't schooled enough to do it. They overestimated what I do, and they just did, you know. So consequently, I was released from night check, and I went back on regular, but I didn't say anything to anybody. I just went back to work daytime, and the first class that was in charge of something I was in asked me if I was still on night check, and I said, well, sort of like, whoa. And he took that as a yes, and he knew I was off, and consequently, when it came to, we went to Rio de Janeiro. One day I was going to go off on liberty, and I couldn't go because he wouldn't let me, and he was getting back at me for in effect, misleading him that I was still back on night check. But that was such an interesting experience because I had to stay on the ship. You know, I was on guard duty. I was guarding our planes out on the aft end of the ship. They were up. We had a number of planes up on the flight deck. And the Brazilians were coming aboard, visiting, and they had apparently never saw an American aircraft carrier before, or maybe an aircraft carrier at all. They were lined up as far as the eye could see down the street. Literally as far as the eye I could see, 4 deep. And they were coming aboard to visit. And they caught me in the back on guard duty, and they were crowded around with 25, 30 people asking me questions, calling out things. It was just a zoo. You were like a celebrity. So that was one of the things that was pretty interesting, yeah.
All right. And then, you know, sailors have kind of a reputation of going on shore and getting themselves into trouble.
Oh, yeah, times. Sure, yeah.
There's drinking, I don't know whether...
But not necessarily getting in trouble, but yeah, but having a lot of fun. See, one of the problems is that you, if you're on a smaller ship, you get your sea legs, and that means that you when you get on dry land, you stagger around. There's nothing you can do about it. And so consequently, it looks like you're drunk all the time when you're on land, when you may not have had a drink for a week or more than 2 weeks. So they got a well-earned reputation.
Okay. I don't know, were there problems with women or prostitutes or other stuff like that?
Well, they were there, but there weren't problems with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you didn't have shore patrol bringing in large numbers of delinquents, or?
Oh, well, One time when we were 57, one of my friends wanted me to go on a double date with him, with his girlfriend. We went to the movie in East Greenwich Village, East Greenwich, Rhode Island,
yeah.
which was right near the base. And so we went with these girls, and then we got out. They wanted us to be in uniform, and I didn't like to go out in uniform. I like to go to civvies, but I did because they wanted us to. And we got out there, and for almost nothing, Sharp and Shoal nailed us. And they made us sit in the back of this vehicle, and we sat there for about half an hour, not knowing what was going to go, what they were what problem with. And finally they let us go, and that kind of indignity, you know,
Yeah.
or some Sharp and Shoal guy comes up to you in Boston. I used to go to Boston for Liberty, and I'm going through this department store, and I've got I got a scarf on, and it's just hanging out of my neck, you know, like people wear scarves. And the Sharp and Shoal guy goes up and says something like, "Get your scarf on right. We don't do such things here in Boston." And so that pissed me off. Excuse me. But that kind of stuff, they took liberties like that, and I didn't like that. I'd earned that kind of stuff, you know.
All right. Now, within your squadron, who were you actually interacting with? Were they all enlisted, or were there officers? Or
Oh, well, no, the officers of the enlisted were separate, but we were very friendly. We were on first name basis, at least to them, and we were friendly because, very frankly, they wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for the enlisted guys taking care of the planes, making sure they flew right, you know, and stayed up there and all that. So consequently, people realized that the other guys were really necessary, and consequently, we got along very well. Yeah, informal too.
okay, I guess they would have flown with enlisted men on their crew. 'Cause you
Well,
have
they
the
did.
officers
The
were
enlisted men
pilots.
flew in the crew.
Yeah,
Yeah. The pilots we had about 31 or 32 pilots, and they were all officers. And then we had one other officer who wasn't a pilot, if I remember right. And then the crewmen were all enlisted men.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and for the most part, when you're on the carrier or something, you're mostly just interacting with your own squadron?
Oh yeah. You almost never did anything with anybody else on a ship's company. Yeah. Right.
All right. Okay. Are there other particular memories that you want to add to the story here?
I don't know. I had a lot of fun.
Okay.
I maximized my experience of travel and seeing things and doing things and having fun. I just did that.
Okay.
There were a lot of guys that just sat around, stayed on the ship, you know, when we went into port, and I just couldn't handle that. I had to get off.
Yeah, well.
I did. Yeah.
Join the Navy, see the world.
Oh,
So you
that's
did.
what I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. All right. So when do you finish active duty?
November of 1958.
Okay. And after you get out, then what do you do?
Well, I went in, I was working for Household Finance Corporation, and I got out. The day after I got out, they called me to come back to work. And, so I went back to work, and I stayed there until I went back to full-time college in February of the next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were you doing then? What were you studying, or?
Oh, well, I was working on a business degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that was still the bachelor's degree at that point?
Yeah, I finished that up. But when I went back to school, this was full time. This was the first time I was at full time college. I was at Chicago Undergraduate Division, which is at Navy Pier in Chicago. Navy Pier, okay?
Right. Yeah.
And so we had a college there, and so we had 2 years. And so I finished, I think I was there for a year and a half or something like that. Then I transferred downstate to Champaign-Urbana, the main campus. And then I went on, got my master's and my PhD, and I spent roughly 6 years at University of Illinois. didn't pay one red. I got 3 degrees. Didn't pay 1 red cent in tuition. Not because I got the GI Bill. I did get the GI Bill, but what I got was the state of Illinois military scholarship.
Okay.
That entitled me to free tuition at any university,
State university?
State university, right? Yeah, yeah. So that's what I did, and I wonder what kids think when I tell them that these days.
All right. So, and then you finished the PhD. What do you do?
What's that?
What did you do after you got the PhD?
I went to work at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York as a monetary economist, and after about 2 years, I was so tired that the first opportunity came along was a job back at a university, Illinois State University, which is about 50, 60 miles from Champaign-Urbana, which is where I went to school, basically, and really loved it down there. So we really were attracted to that. So we took this job in Champaign-Urbana,
Normal or Bloomington?
Normal.
Yeah, Normal.
No, Bloomington, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you eventually wound up at Grand Valley State.
I did. At Illinois State, the second year I was there, they said the administration wants everybody to go out in the job market and get offers, see what they're really worth or something. Okay, fine. So I go out, go to the meetings. I find this job. It's at Kalamazoo College. It's the highest paying job on the list of about 12 jobs. Kalamazoo College turns out to be a very, very selective for smart students, really smart students. And so I went back and I quizzed some of my really best students I had, the smartest guys I had. Do you think I'd be able to make it at this place? And they said, oh yeah, yeah. So then I'm taking a job there. I took the Monroe Chair of Money and Banking, it was an endowed chair, and I was there 4 years, and then things started turning south. And Grand Valley came up to me 2 years in a row about a job in the economics department, this first one. So I went down out to interview them, and it worked out all right, but they decided what I had, my fields weren't what they were looking for, which made perfect sense. Fine. The next year, they came back to me and said, we don't want you for the econ department, we want you for the business school. We're going to start an MBA program. So it turned out I was the first graduate faculty member at Grand Valley.
All right.
I don't know if you know that. You did, I'm sure.
I did not know that. No.
So I was the first one to hire Seidman Graduate College of Business hired. Okay. So that's what I did from then on.
And what year was that?
That was, I got this, 1974. I think 1974, okay. Or 73, fall of 73, yeah.
All right. Now, Grand Valley had some interesting times in the late
had
60s.
What?
The Grand Valley had some interesting times in the late 60s
it did.
And 70s.
It was up in the air all the time.
And they're trying to figure out what they were.
Yeah, that's true. It was a very interesting, Kalamazoo College was the same, and it was never changing, and although there were some ominous clouds when I left, but nevertheless, Grand Valley was totally different. I walked in, and I'm on the executive committee of the All-College Faculty Senate right off the bat, and we wrote a new constitution for the university, and we did all this brand new stuff, set up all kinds of programs and places, stuff like that. It was just incredible, yeah. And of course, that's how it got to be big, but it wasn't big when I got there. It was much smaller, much different institution. It was 4 colleges, as a matter of fact. Was when I got there, yeah.
All right. Now, before we came into the studio, you mentioned something about the girls.
The girls?
The girls. Were you going to talk about the girls?
In the Navy.
In the Navy, yeah.
Yeah. Well, as part of this NATO fleet, we went into England, Plymouth.
Yep.
And I went in and visit Plymouth, and I met 5 girls or 6 girls. Can't remember exactly. They were all separate. And I agreed to meet them at some place at 6 o'clock that night, some pub. I went back to the ship, and I got 5 of my buddies. We all went in, and we had a great time with these girls, wonderful time. And then they found out that we weren't going to be there for a week. We were going to be there for one day. That we were leaving the next day.
Yeah.
And one of them broke down and cried.
Oh.
That they'd come there specifically to meet American sailors because some relative of theirs in the past had met an American serviceman and got married, went back to the United States, and was happily ever after.
Oh.
And that's what they were, and they thought we were going to be there for 7 days. That was it, you know. So that was one of the things that was interesting.
All right, so you dodged that particular bullet.
With that,
You dodged that particular bullet.
well,
Maybe.
yeah. I didn't get involved with local girls anyway. I had friends back in Quonset Point who did get involved with local girls in Providence, and some of them got married, and they ended up staying there. And I didn't want to stay there. I thought Boston and Rhode Island were depressed areas, and they were compared to Chicago. That was during the recession of '80, I think. Not '80, 58. There were 3 recessions in the '50s because of Eisenhower's policies, and that was one of them. Yeah. But it hit some places in the country more than others, and it hit the East Coast that area pretty hard compared to, let's say, Chicago area, which is what I was used to.
All right. So if you look back at this, now did you stay in the Naval Reserve after you finished? Or
that was when I was released from my duty in November 5th or 6th of '58. That was all I never did anything else.
All right.
I went off and did my civilian thing, and a year and a half later I got my discharge in the mail.
Okay. Now to look back at your time in the Navy, what do you think you took out of that, or what did you learn from it?
Experiences, really, doing a lot of different things and seeing a lot of different things. I've never had a time in my life like I did that last 18 months, where we went all over the place. We went to the Caribbean, we went to Antarctic Circle, we went to Europe, and Brazil, and I did all kinds of things. Flew off an aircraft carrier, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really a great time. Probably the best 18 months of my life.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much then for sharing the story.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
That'll do it.
It was interesting.
Okay.